Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the New Frontiers in Transportation Student Competition 2021. This is our third student competition that's been hosted by the University of Toronto Transportation Alumni Network. And we are very excited to have everyone joining us and very excited to see our student groups presenting today. My name is Yunfei. I will be your host for today's symposium. I'm a project manager from HDR, also a vice chair for the U of T Transportation Alumni Network Committee. I did both my undergrad and graduate degrees at U of T. We'll start the symposium today by a land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge that this land on which the University of Toronto operates, for thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. For our safety moment today, I want to touch on wildfires. Like it or not, they're happening more often these days than we like. A couple key points: never attempt to outrun a blaze. Always seek covers around water sources. If there's no water nearby, try to find wet blankets to cover. Listen to your local weather and news for latest and evacuation orders. Use masks, which we all have abundance of thanks to COVID, to protect your lawns from smoke. And also have a 5-minute plan, whether you're at home, when you're traveling, and this plan will get you ready to leave your house after being ordered to evacuate. For our diversity moment today, I want to touch on the International Equal Pay Day, which is on September 18th, this Saturday. This is established by the UN in 2019, so just 2 years ago, and it advocates for equal pay for work of equal value. And globally, despite decades of activism and dozens of laws on equal pay, women still earn less than 80% of every dollar men do. And if you think Canada might be better, we're not so much. So this is a day that we can shift our gear towards equal pay for equal pay for work of equal value. With that, here's our agenda today. We're going to do an introduction, and then we'll talk about the themes and a brief overview of the this year's competition. And most of the time will be spent for our student groups to present. Each student group will have 20 minutes to present, a 20-minute slot for presentation and Q&A. Each group will have 12 minutes to present. Kevin, who is in this meeting today, our treasurer for U10 committee, he will be keeping an eye on the time. And if you're hitting your 12-minute mark, he will give you a kind reminder and the time is up. Followed by the presentation, we have our judges here today, and they will be followed by a Q&A session. So each presentation will take about 20 minutes, and then we'll have a judging break, and we'll have a brief U10 presentation, followed by results and awards. For introductions, I'm going to pause here for a minute. If everyone who's joined the call, if you can kindly introduce yourself in the chat. With your name, your workplace or employer, your graduation year, and any program that you attended at U of T, if that's applicable to you. So please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. All right, while we're introducing ourselves in the chat, I'm gonna talk about this year's theme. So this is a topic that me personally is very passionate about, and our theme is addressing transportation equity in the post-pandemic city. Transportation equity is never a new topic, but it has certainly attracted a lot of attentions during and after COVID. We have 4 teams today. Each team will have 3 students or recent graduates, and each team represent at least 2 different U of T departments. And they have worked over 2 months and study and develop a topic of their choice. And each team will also had 3 mentors, 2 from private sectors and 1 from public sector, who were helping our student groups to develop their topic. We have our judges here. We have 3 judges here who has spent a lot of time reviewing the papers that have been received from our student groups. So we have Antonio, Solution Manager from StreetLight Data. We have Sandra, Senior Transit Planner from HDR. And we have Helen, Director, Infrastructure Planning and Engineering Services from the City of Mississauga. As I mentioned, the report has already been submitted to our judges, and they have been pre-scored before this presentation. They take to 60% of the total marks, and they will be evaluated based on idea and use case, research methods, and written submission quality. For today's presentation, it will take 40% of the total marks, and our judges here are with us today to score them live, and they will be evaluated based on organization, quality of research, persuasiveness, and question responses. For the top 3 ranked team, we'll have some nice cash prizes for them. So for the first ranked team, each student will receive $650. The second ranked team, each student will receive $475, and our third ranked team will receive $375 per student. So with that, I'm gonna pass it on to why we're all here today, the student presentations. So our first topic is on honoring of transfers, equity evaluation of transit policies in cross-boundary trips. It will be presented by Rick, Navyata, and Alex. And I apologize in advance if I butcher any of our students or mentors' names. But we have 3 mentors for this team as well. So we have Josephine from IBI Group. We have Matthew from Metrolinx, and Rudy from TraffMobility Engineering. So with that, I'm gonna pass the presentation to our students for them to walk us through their work in the past 2 months.
Just checking, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
All right, guess we'll start. Hello, everybody. My name is Rick, and I'm joined by my colleagues Navyata and Alex. And today we're presenting honoring of transfers and looking into equity evaluation of transit policies for cross-boundary trips. So we're going to start with a bit of background on equity and COVID-19. Then we'll look into our problem definition and look into our methodology, then the results from our analysis, and then our proposed policy and ways we can implement it in the future. So with that said, we'll hand it off to Navyata for the background.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, so I'll be walking everyone through the background, but before we dive into it, I would like to explain our perspective of transit equity. According to our research, transportation justice is divided into 2 sections, horizontal and vertical equity. Horizontal equity aims at treating everybody equally unless justified otherwise for specific reasons and ensuring equal access to a service. Vertical equity, on the other hand, includes progressive policies concerning income levels. The focus of vertical policies is geared towards benefiting disadvantaged communities. Our proposal aims to reduce the inequalities in the region-wide transit network instead of simply ensuring equal access. Now, moving on to the current scenario. Due to the spread of the virus, municipalities have imposed restrictions on daily mobility of cities. This has impacted the travel behaviors and decisions of daily transit users. Transit systems lack in bridging the gap between the lower income workers and their access to opportunities, making transit a civil rights issue. To better understand this, an interview was conducted with the advocacy organization TTC Riders Group. The key takeaways from the conversations shed light upon the differences between pre-pandemic and post-pandemic public transit. Before the pandemic, there were crowding delays. However, now, the same problem exists, but jeopardizing riders' health and income. Bus bunching was common before the pandemic. However, the crowding caused by service cuts has made transit more unreliable and heightened the impact of the pandemic on workers. Most importantly, equitable fares are an even bigger concern than pre-pandemic. The economic security of equity-seeking residents has decreased, but TTC fares have remained the same. Programs to offset the cost of transit and account for loss in wages, such as the Fare Passes program, have the same flaws as the standard monthly pass. Many low-income residents cannot pay upfront cost for the fare pass or even a Presto card and resort to paying cash fares, which is more expensive in the long run. Artificial fare boundaries set by the city limits the opportunities such as recreation, education, health, and employment, as those residents would be deterred by the double fare. And finally, affluent choice riders who are able to choose between transit and a car can simply drive across the municipal border as their first resort, then take transit and ride to their destination. This means that the double fare is a regressive policy and disproportionately hurts low-income riders. Now we'll move on to the trends in GTA presented by Alex.
Thank you, Navyata. So using the Transportation Tomorrow survey, a household travel survey that captures 5% of the GTHA, we can analyze the characteristics of local transit trips between Toronto and Mississauga. Within this travel corridor, approximately 18,000 cross-boundary trips are made, with over 16,800 being made exclusively by local transit agencies. From these trips, 19% of riders have a household income of under $40,000 per year, which we define in our study as equity-seeking riders. Using the TTS, we can also analyze the distribution of these trips using their start times. We observe that most trips from Toronto, the purple graph, occur in the morning peak hours with the highest frequency between 5 and 8 a.m. And these trips from Mississauga, the blue graph, occur in the evening peak hours with the highest frequency between 4 and 7 p.m. The TTS also allows us to plot these travel patterns spatially and identify additional travel patterns. When looking at the spatial distribution of local transit trips from Toronto to Mississauga, the map on the left, many trip origins shaded in purple are located in many residential areas on the western side of Toronto and the downtown core. Conversely, many trip destinations shaded in yellow and green are concentrated in major employment areas near Pearson Airport and Square One. When looking at the spatial pattern of transit trips from Mississauga to Toronto, the map on the right, we see that this pattern is flipped, with trip origins occurring in these employment lands and trip destinations located throughout these residential zones.
So with the data and perspective shared in the background, we believe that the riders crossing Toronto-Mississauga border are generally essential workers from Toronto, taking local transit to Mississauga's employment lands for jobs, and a sizable chunk of those being low-income jobs. The problem we will tackle is the double fare essential workers pay when crossing the municipal border. Our analysis will explore what benefits arise if double fare is removed and whether this change will lead to an equitable outcome. We will also determine the best policy to address this artificial travel barrier and implement the steps to eliminate it.
So now we're going to look at our methodology for our analysis. So our analysis compares two scenarios, the current base case and an alternative scenario where there's no double fare. We chose to evaluate these scenarios using accessibility and a value of time approach. So isochronal accessibility is a concept that measures the number of opportunities within a certain travel time threshold, while value of time is a concept that converts travel time into cost. We use jobs as our measure of opportunity since it's easily measurable and can measure other opportunities. And we use the value of time that's equal to the minimum wage of Ontario. So the figure on the right shows kind of hypothetical change in accessibility under two scenarios. Due to computational limitations, we limit our analysis to only the morning and rush hours, but an ideal analysis will expand upon this. So first, we used TTS data and census data to identify equity-seeking neighborhoods. Next, we found the number of jobs in each neighborhood. Then we calculated travel time between Toronto and Mississauga using only TDC and MyWay. Once we know the travel times, we can determine for each origin zone how many jobs are reachable under our two scenarios. So now we'll take a look at some of our trends with the results. For trips starting from Toronto and ending Mississauga in the morning rush hours, equity neighborhoods highlighted by the red bar for the fourth quartile would have a higher increase in accessibility than more affluent neighborhoods with our proposed change. This is consistent with our aim of achieving vertical equity. But for Mississauga to Toronto trips, the highest increases occur among the first and second quartiles or among affluent neighborhoods. But as pointed by Alex earlier, travel between Toronto and Mississauga in the morning rush hour is dominated by Toronto origins. So the alternative scenario would still lead to a more equitable outcome. When we look at the maps, we can understand why trips originating from the two cities experience different trends. For both cities, it's the outlying neighborhoods that experience the largest increases in accessibility. And on the maps, zones with yellow have the largest increases. For Toronto, it's Scarborough, and under the base case, little to no jobs are reachable. Under the alternative scenario, residents are more incentivized to travel to Mississauga now that their overall cost is lowered. Scarborough also contains a large number of equity-seeking neighborhoods, which are highlighted in red. Unlike Toronto, the outlying neighborhoods in Mississauga are more affluent, and the equity-seeking neighborhoods are closer to the Toronto border. This explains why there's an equitable outcome for Toronto to Mississauga trips, but not for Mississauga to Toronto trips.
We'll now take a look at our recommendation and proposed policy. So as seen from our results, removing the double fare would positively benefit both TTC and MyWay riders by making more jobs readily accessible for equity-seeking riders due to the willingness to travel further based on the concept of generalized cost and value of time. For a proposed policy to be effective, we feel that it must meet the following three objectives. Collaborative. The policy recommendation should encourage collaboration between municipal transit agencies within the GTHA. Scale. The recommendation should have the ability to be utilized in other areas of the GTHA with relative ease. And equitable. The proposed recommendation should implement the concept of vertical equity. In addition, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown the inequalities within the sphere of transportation, with many asking how to make our cities and transportation systems more equitable. In order to take advantage of this rare opportunity, the recommended policy must be able to be implemented quickly with few planning and policy roadblocks. For this reason, smaller policy changes were considered rather than a larger scale regional transit plan, such as creating a zone or distance-based fare system, which requires a region-wide reconfiguration of transit planning and policy. In addition, these types of fare systems can punish individuals making longer trips or crossing boundaries, as is done in this study, making them pay more in comparison to other riders. Our policy recommendation that meets all these objectives listed above is the accepting of transfers between Toronto and Mississauga border. This essentially means transfers when switching from a TTC to MyWay bus are free and vice versa. In terms of our objectives, firstly, this policy invites collaboration by having direct communication between Toronto and Mississauga transit agencies exclusively, instead of multiple transit agencies if a zonal system was used. Secondly, in terms of being scalable, the policy of honoring transfers between municipal transit agencies already exists between some municipalities in the GTHA. For example, transfers between Brampton Transit and MyWay are free, giving evidence for this policy to be implemented elsewhere. Finally, as seen in the previous section, the removal of paying an additional fare provided a positive increase in the number of reachable jobs due to the ability to travel further. Toronto to Mississauga riders from equity-seeking communities saw a 35% increase, while Mississauga to Toronto riders saw a 15% increase.
Lastly, moving on to implementation, which is divided into three parts. Firstly, coming to an agreement, honoring transfers would inevitably affect the fare revenue of individual transit agencies. Since revenue is often intertwined with service planning and operations, there would need to be negotiations to sort out revenue and service changes. Secondly, weighing the costs and benefits. In this case, on the grand scheme of things, the loss will be relatively lower than the increased access for essential workers, employment, and overall access to opportunities for lower-income neighborhoods, for lower-income households. Lastly, provincial subsidies. We suggest that the provincial government subsidize the loss of the revenue, as it would be appropriate for Metrolinx's mandate of promoting an integrated transit network and would not be unprecedented, as the provincial government directly subsidized transit operations until 1998.
In conclusion, our research exploring the concept of transit equity with regards to suburb-to-suburb transit trips between Toronto and Mississauga can be summarized accordingly. First, many local transit trips between Toronto and Mississauga are made by Toronto residents who work in various employment lands around Pearson International Airport and Square One. Secondly, the removal of a double fare would increase the access to opportunities between Toronto and Mississauga and the equity of suburb-to-suburb transit trips using the concept of generalized travel cost. Third, the accepting of transfers between TTC and MyWay would foster direct collaboration between both municipalities, build on the concept of vertical equity, and could be implemented quickly with the possibility of further integration within the GTHA. The removal of the double fare helps to address the social, spatial, and economic barriers to suburb travel and create a more equitable and effective transit network. Thank you.
Thank you. Just right on time as well. That was really well done. I'm going to pass it on to one of our judges. I think, Sandra, you'll be asking a question to our presenters.
Yes. Hello, I'm Sandra Padilla. I pretty much appreciated your insight into the impact and value of eliminating interagency transfer penalties that it would have on advancing equity. I think you made a really strong case. Even though it seems obvious, there hasn't been a lot of conversation about the fact that those who are pulling the strongest weight or pulling, doing the most during the pandemic, who are essential workers, are essentially being expected to pay the same for less services in some instances. There just hasn't been a lot of conversation about that, and I really appreciated that insight. Something that I do wish that you touched on more are the challenges to implementation and what it has taken to make it happen where it is happening, such as I think in your paper, you mentioned Brampton Transit and MyWay having a reciprocity agreement. And I'm wondering if you had any insight into like what that arrangement is like, what it took to make that happen, what are some of the ways that they're making it possible, and how that could be scaled to the regional level.
Yeah, I could answer. So as we understand, one of the insights with our interviewees is that for Brampton, Mississauga, there's a large amount of users traveling on each system. So a large portion of Brampton users are from Mississauga and vice versa. The challenge with the TDC is that a large portion, or around 85% of TDC users are from Toronto, and there's not much riders from other adjacent municipalities. So there hasn't been much will from the municipalities to get this done with Toronto specifically. So that's why we proposed that the province dangle sort of a carrot to municipalities with funding in order to make this happen. And all the other logistical issues has already mostly been solved with common payment system and integration with the at the terminals with the new Kipling terminals. And Alex or Navyata can add on if I missed anything.
Nothing for me. I will say that with the extension of the Toronto subway into Vaughan, we've seen that Toronto and the TTC are willing to extend their services past boundaries, and we've seen this before. So hopefully they can work that out with other neighboring municipalities as well, not just York Region.
Great, thank you. Sandra, do you want to ask another question? Are you good?
No, I'm good. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Implementation is definitely where the challenge would be. But I thought that presentation, how you answered it, was really well done. So with that, and I think I forgot to mention this at the beginning part of the presentation. So this entire session will be recorded, and it will be posted on the YouTube website after the session is completed. So if you have to leave early or you're going to share the link to anyone after this the symposium. There will be a video available to be shared. With that, we're going to pass it on to our second group. Their topic is on Toronto's active routes. Our presenters are Angel, Danelle, and Kadendi. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. And we have three mentors for this group as well. We have John from IVI, we have Cherie from Canada Help, and Trevor from the City of Hamilton. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to our student groups to present.
I'm sorry, it says it. Okay.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Angel.
I'm Lara.
And I'm Danelle.
And our project for the UTAN competition is called Toronto's Active Routes. We would like to start off with a land acknowledgement that we are on the unceded territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. We would also like to thank our wonderful mentors for supporting us through the process of this competition. Here's an overview of our presentation. We'll start off with an introduction of our problem and our area of study. Then we'll talk through our methodologies, analysis, and our proposed strategy.
To give you a quick overview of our project, first of all, we determined that residents in the high-density Moss Park and St. Jamestown neighborhoods in Toronto are underserved by active transportation and lack adequate green space. That is why currently underutilized laneways and alleyways can be revitalized, greened, and made into attractive alternative corridors for pedestrians and cyclists making short trips. So we propose to develop a system of active transportation routes through underutilized small areas in the neighborhoods, which emphasizes greenery and free equal access. This is called the active routes.
So our area of study stretches south from Bloor Street to Queen Street and east from Jarvis to Parliament Street. This includes a few distinct character areas, including part of the Garden District and Cabbagetown, but most notably for our purposes, it also encompasses Moss Park and St. Jamestown, some of the densest areas in Toronto with the least per capita access to green space. One of the reasons that we chose this area is because it's uniquely fragmented, with some areas very well serviced and some areas extremely underserved. And this is why a connected active transportation network is key. We're not only promoting equity by adding more amenities and green space, but also promoting equity by improving access to the existing green infrastructure assets in the study area, such as the Rosedale Ravine lands just north of the community and the Allen Gardens in the middle. Because low-income and high-density communities are uniquely unprepared to respond to extreme climate weather events as a result of climate change, community organizations in this area, such as the St. Jamestown Community Co-op, who we interviewed, regularly call attention to environmental and climate concerns. They also call attention to mental and physical health challenges associated with residing in small spaces without adequate park space and green space, as well as to personal safety challenges for women and young people, because Moss Park and St. Jamestown experience higher than average crime rates. So our proposal aims to address all three of these interconnected problems, and in doing so, it aligns with municipal priorities. For example, the Resilient TO Resilience Strategy aims to enhance the capacity of neighborhoods to prepare for and respond to shocks and stresses. And Transform TO set the goal of 75% of short trips under 5 kilometers being completed by active transportation by 2050. So we feel that our proposal really works towards both of these goals, and in doing so, it aligns with the broader goals for the city. As you'll see in this presentation, as well as in our report, the issues that we are addressing are particularly visible in St. Jamestown and Moss Park, but they're relevant across Toronto and in other cities, which is why this model could act as why this project could act as a model to be adapted in similar contexts.
Sarah, you're muted.
Sorry. Our proposal is based on three main pillars, which are problem research, interviews, and best practice reviews. The research for this project began with an assessment of green space and active transit inequity in Toronto in order to select neighborhoods most in need of improved active transit networks. Next, we researched benefits of active transportation and green spaces and proceeded with an analysis of City of Toronto's initiatives that are related to our proposal. As for the interviews, we conducted semi-structured interviews with professionals who were involved in the projects we looked at for our best practice reviews. Through the interviews, we learned more about the experience working on a linear park project, better understood major logistical challenges that initiatives similar to our proposal face, and learned more about communities' priorities and goals. To develop a background understanding of the best practices in active transit and multi-use park revitalization projects, we began a comparative review of related projects across North America. We looked at the Laneway project, the Green Line, and the Montreal's Green Alleys. The highlight takeaways from the best practice reviews first of all, success largely depends on public support. That is why having an established problem or need makes it easier to bring the community together. Secondly, for projects that connect multiple communities and neighborhoods, it is especially important to ensure that it has a distinct, recognizable identity and that it feels relevant and inclusive to users at all points of the corridor. And lastly, we learned that modular system is a strategy to consider. Since allowing any group of residents hoping to revitalize a local alleyway access funding, support, and streamlined permit system to the city shows positive results.
The Active Routes initiative will improve environmental resilience by replacing paved surfaces with native vegetation. We intend to plant native species and habitats that will be affected by the construction of the Ontario line according to their environmental impact assessment, such as the butternut walnut, the whitewood asters, and habitats of the monarch butterfly and migratory birds. The benefits of green spaces include improving air quality, stormwater retention, and increasing biodiversity, which are all important to support the neighborhood, especially since there is expected to be 23,000 residents living in Moss Park by 2041. Besides environmental benefits, green spaces are massively valuable to the health of individuals. Parks are sites for socialization, exercise, organized events, and community animation. A study by the Trust for Public Land found that people who regularly use parks get more and better exercise compared to people who don't, but most people are not willing to walk more than 10 minutes to a park. So this shows that there is need for more parks and green spaces closer to people's homes. In Toronto, only around 7% of commuters use active modes of transportation. However, the percentage increases to 16% when commuters travel less than 5 kilometers. Thus, active transportation is a great solution for short trips, but many don't have the opportunity to do it because their neighborhood lacks the infrastructure. Children, older adults, and inexperienced bikers do not feel safe traveling on roads without high-quality bike lanes. So the Active Routes network will provide cyclists and pedestrians a safe and equitable route to travel through with wide lanes and few cars.
Our vision for Toronto's Active Routes is a network of pedestrian and cyclist-friendly paths throughout the small streets and alleys in St. Jamestown and Moss Park, and connecting these areas to green infrastructure assets near and within the study area. One of the highlights in our vision is connections to laneways that are already undergoing revitalization by other groups and organizations. For example, the orange lines in this map indicate paths identified as having potential for revitalization or currently undergoing revitalization by the Laneway project. One example of this is the laneway to the east of the Allen Gardens, which is currently undergoing traffic calming measures, adding lighting and beautification by the Laneway project in collaboration with spiritual groups in the community. So this is a perfect example of a pathway that could be incorporated into the Active Routes network. And the next image highlights some of our proposed strategies to ensure that the routes are adequately animated and activated. In accordance with the city's mobilized low carbon neighborhood strategy, Toronto's Active Routes will be a community group led initiative. strengthening the ability of local leaders to promote climate action and provide meaningful benefit to their communities. Groups of leaders can adopt an underutilized laneway or alley and would be supported by us in spearheading its revitalization. In accordance with the goals and priorities of local residents, the community leaders will incorporate truly relevant design features. For example, some residents may prioritize greening the laneways and may incorporate community gardens, permeable paving, or rain gardens for stormwater storage. Others may be more interested in safety features, such as adding emergency call poles or more extensive streetlights. The fun thing about the modularity of this project is that the design features of a particular laneway can connect to its unique geography. A laneway near a school may integrate a tiny library or a children's playground, and a laneway near a grocery store or a community garden may incorporate a community fridge. This kind of flexibility allows the project to respond not only to the broader interests of St. Jamestown and Moss Park, but also to the character of particular streets. In doing so, it'll further entice people to choose active transportation for short trips and to reduce foot traffic on overcrowded main roads.
The timeline of our proposal will consist of 5 major phases. During phase 1, initial startup funding will be secured. Phase 2, initial research, consultation, and project planning begins. This stage implies the research of potential laneways that could become part of the active route system, as well as connection to local community to gather information on the potential areas involved. Phase 3, logistics. At this point, the plan is to develop a more extensive and deep connection with the public and start outreaching to the local communities for support. Phase 4, implementation, is basically installation of the needed amenities and greening. Phase 5, maintenance. Except for the maintenance itself, the stage involves active feedback collection, where the active route team remains responsible for resident feedback and incorporating needed amenities and changes as needed.
As for potential funding, we could collaborate with the City of Toronto or Metrolinx because of our shared mission in fighting the climate crisis and building community resilience. We could also reach out to the Canadian Urban Institute or nonprofits like the Laneway Project and Park People. The most dominant challenge for our project is the physical limitations of the narrow alleys. Although all of the routes will contain greenery and street lighting, only certain routes will have space for extra amenities like park benches or water fountains. We expect that there will be pushback from local residents, so we will be holding public consultations to work with residents to find solutions together. We hope to ensure that this is an equitable process by being aware of which residents are absent or unheard during consultations. Although active transportation is not an accessible solution for everyone, there are still many people who can switch from driving over to walking or biking. The Active Routes initiative seizes the opportunity of reactivating underutilized laneways while benefiting the environment, creating safe and equitable transportation options, and bringing communities together. Thank you so much for watching our presentation.
Thank you, and just in time as well. I'm gonna pass it on to our judges to ask questions. So Helen first, and then followed by Antoinette.
Thanks, Yunfei. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for the presentation. It was really great. I really appreciated listening to, I'll say, creative ideas for introducing more active transportation opportunities in an urban setting. Definitely one of the challenges we're faced with. I happen to work for the city of Mississauga in terms of providing safe and comfortable connections. So I actually had a question of clarification and really focused on the implementation. If I understood your paper correctly and looked at some of the diagrams that you incorporated, a number of the proposed active routes incorporated public streets and not just laneways. And one of the challenges we're always faced with is how do you accommodate those different uses with the uses that are in place now, so particularly underground servicing, so water, storm, and sanitary sewers, emergency services, those types of things when you're converting something over to exclusively an active transportation use.
Yeah, that's a great question, Helen. And I can start to tackle that. So we included both laneways and the main streets because we think that it's important that the pathway is useful for people who are going on longer journeys. For example, cyclists going across from Sherburne to the upcoming Ontario Line station, as well as for people undergoing shorter trips, for example, like to the convenience store or just around the neighborhood. And we know that some of the streets, for example, Sherburne, have really extensive bike lanes as it is, and some have less extensive bike lanes. So we think that having a combination of uses, a combination of bike lanes and pedestrian pathways would allow for different types of cyclists to use the spaces, as well as for pedestrians to use the spaces. And Angel, if you want to expand on some of the challenges, you're welcome to do that as well.
Thanks. And thank you for asking the question. I think it is always a challenge to revitalize a street, especially since a lot of it is used for roadside parking. The things you mentioned, such as emergency services, like water and sewage, I think those can remain the same. But we did notice that while looking through our area of study on Google Maps Street View, there are a lot of spaces that are currently vacant or used for parking that we could transfer into community assets like gardens or these bike lanes. And since each route in our network will be planned like one by one, the solution for each street will be different depending on the situation of the street.
Great. Thanks very much for your responses. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Great. Antonio, do you have another question for the team?
I do. Thanks for the presentation. This was great to see. My question is about applicability to other neighborhoods. So older Toronto neighborhoods do have these laneways that you can make use of. What about as you get further away from the downtown core where you don't see these laneways and alleys as frequently? Is your solution applicable to those types of neighborhoods as well?
I think I can start to answer this as well. So in our best practice review for this project, we were looking at several different examples, but one of them was the Ruelsburg system in Montreal. And we originally wanted to adapt that model to Toronto. And we found that the reason that we were unable to just plop it over to Toronto is because they have a very different grid system. And their grid system allows for Ruelsburgs to be between houses, and that's really successful because it divides the access to main roads as well as it allows for access to main roads while also reducing the car access. So I think the modularity of the system would allow us to create green alleys in any kind of a city, but it would be responsive to the unique geography and responsive to how dense that area is, responsive to the types of residences in that neighborhood as well. And again, Angel and Lara, if you have anything to add, that would be wonderful.
I think I can add a little bit. So you're asking about areas outside of downtown where there are fewer laneways. I think that we would still, since areas outside of downtown have more wide streets and busy traffic, we think that the bike lanes on these type of busy streets are a bit dangerous. So that's also one of the reasons we wanted to implement this project, where we can divert active transportation away from these busy main streets into smaller streets. And there will always be other smaller streets that we can implement these to.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Definitely a very interesting topic. There are a lot of laneways in downtown Toronto that could use some love. I don't live too far from your study area, so if one day that comes to true, then we're looking forward to that. So with that, I'm gonna go on to our third team. So I just got a message during the presentation that our third team that's originally planned, they have a member that's still stuck on TTC subway. So I contacted our fourth team that's on our agenda, and they're willing to swap their position. So the fourth team on our agenda will be presenting next. So the topic we have here is addressing transit equity amid service reductions, examining changes in neighborhood connectivity as a result of COVID-19 pandemic induced service reduction. Our presenters are Benjamin, Harry, and Gordon, and they also have three mentors, Nansen from RG Burnside, Greg Hoy from BA Group, and Josh Rank from York Region. I'll pass it on to our student team.
All right. Thanks so much for that quick introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gordon.
Hi, everyone. My name is Harry. And today we will present our research finding on how the TTC has approached equitable transit service planning during the pandemic.
During the initial month of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns, TTC ridership dropped drastically. The initial month alone saw a 42% drop in passenger revenue compared to budgeted passenger revenue of 2020. Personal tabs on TTC's network have also decreased by almost 90% immediately after lockdown measures were implemented. With the drop in transit demand, the amount of bus service also fell over 10% in the initial month of March, April, May, and June. Compared to budgeted service level for that same time period, the TTC monthly report in December 2020 also mentioned anecdotally that extra bus services were needed along certain high ridership bus routes that were experiencing overcrowding. Therefore, as transit demand and supplies decrease, an equitable transit service network must ensure that those who depend on public transit to get around are still adequately served.
Our research used systematic and quantitative methods to assess how transit services to low connectivity and low transit accessibility communities were affected during the pandemic. Moreover, we use our observations to reflect on TTC's long-term equity framework for transit service planning. We observed worsening transit connectivity in neighborhoods that are more captive to transit usage in their daily commute trips. We then investigated TTC's equity framework in their recent service planning documents and found potential flaws in how the TTC defines equity and how they measure success in equitable service planning.
So to explore this problem, today we'll start by introducing the concept of transit captivity and how it relates to equity and guides our research and analytical methods. From there, we'll present some general findings, followed by a more detailed look at a specific traffic analysis zone. We'll conclude by synthesizing how our findings can help inform industry.
The concept of transit captivity has been a decade-long method used by transit agencies to understand their transit ridership basis. Captive riders are traditionally assumed to have no other viable transportation choice and will take transit for their trips no matter the comfortability and service quality. On the other hand, choice riders are assumed to have different modal options but choose to take transit due to comfortability or convenience. The difference between choice riders and captive riders are socio-spatial in nature, making transit captivity an appropriate socio-spatial definition to determine where equitable distribution of transit services are needed. Furthermore, transit agencies tend to target transit choice rider when attempting to expand ridership while deprioritizing captive riders.
The TTC's recent 5-year service plan debuted its equity framework for future transit service planning. While its framework does not explicitly define equity and measures of equitable planning outcome, it does mention 2 service planning initiatives. The first being an extensive 2-year consultation process with disadvantaged communities. The second initiative aims to add more bus services along routes that serve socioeconomically disadvantaged communities within the City of Toronto's neighborhood improvement area. This second initiative seems to have been accelerated by the TTC's COVID-19 response and transition plan, as bus services have already been increased in neighborhood improvement areas. However, neighborhood improvement areas, which comprises 31 census tracts in the City of Toronto, are produced by the City of Toronto's social service agencies for the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy, which is focused on community planning and development in neighborhoods that face a broad range of community-wide social, health, and economic issues. Out of the 16 indicators of socioeconomic vulnerability used to produce this framework, none of which are transportation or transit related. These 16 indicators instead reflect socioeconomic statuses and public health vulnerabilities.
So to go into our own methodology, we took Transportation Tomorrow survey data from the 2016 TTS at the traffic analysis zone. We looked from this at jobs distribution and built origin destination matrices as the basis of our spatial analysis. Connectivity and accessibility are 2 spatial measures of transit service adequacy that we focused on to define transit captivity. Our report understands accessibility as a fixed indicator of how many rapid transit stations are located within walking distances to any given neighborhood. We considered TAZs to have good accessibility if they were located within Toronto's streetcar network near the downtown, or if they are located within walking distance to subway or GO stations. Connectivity is understood as a variable that changes depending on actual service levels, the data for which is frequently updated through GTFS data. Connectivity was used to reflect changes in service levels before and during the pandemic. Our study used GTFS data from February and April of 2020 to build 1-hour transit sheds comparing the number of employment opportunities accessible by transit.
And here with the TTS 2016 data, we also calculated p-values to determine correlation between certain socioeconomic data and transit usage. Our statistical analysis indicated significant correlation between high transit usage and low household income, as well as low car ownership. These 2 socioeconomic indicators are then combined with transit accessibility, which is our geographic variable to determine captivity. We selected TAZ that were in the bottom decile of car ownership rates to ensure that we study community that were more reliant on transit for their commuting needs. We then grouped the chosen TAZs by income and transit accessibility. This map here shows household car ownership rates across TAZ in Toronto.
Ultimately, we selected a sample of 20 TAZs across the city. 8 were considered choice TAZs, 12 were considered captive TAZs. The majority of captive TAZs are located within the 31 census tracts that make up the neighborhood improvement area framework, which is designated again by the TTC to be used in their equity framework to dedicate more transit services to. Our next step then was comparing connectivities across different TAZs as well as across time.
So going into our connectivity measures, we found that prior to the pandemic, captive neighborhoods had on average about 27.5% less connectivity to employment opportunities than choice neighborhoods. Comparing the origin destination matrices to transit sheds, we saw further differences in transit connectivity between choice and captive neighborhoods. While 20% of transit-based commute trips taken from captive neighborhoods took over 1 hour, choice neighborhoods saw only about 13% of their transit commutes exceed that 1 hour threshold. These results reinforce our hypothesis that transit captive neighborhoods are likely to be poorly served, leading to less connectivity and longer commutes. These maps illustrate some of that great disconnect in 4 studied captive neighborhoods. Comparing service reductions from the COVID-19 pandemic, captive TAZs were hit harder with on average a reduction to about 92% of the pre-pandemic size, while choice TAZs maintained about 98% of their connectivity. We believe that connectivity to employment sites should not decrease at all in socially spatially vulnerable neighborhoods, many of which are captive to transit.
In the last 2 sets of maps, the TAZ display in the top left corner, TAZ 369 showed demonstrably worse transit connectivity than other TAZ with similar socioeconomic conditions. TAZ 369 is suburban residential neighborhood located in North Etobicoke. The TAZ is the most captive North neighborhood in our sample. The TAZ has almost 50% of its morning commute trips taken by transit. It is socioeconomically vulnerable with high proportion of low household incomes, and almost half of all households are without a car. TAZ 369 has poor accessibility to the rapid transit network, and its pre-pandemic connectivity allows its commuters to reach only 281,000 jobs within 1 hour, compared to the 783,000 jobs our average for the captive neighborhoods, and this is very low. And at the same time, 50% of commute trips are destined for employment sites outside of its 1 hour transit.
While captive TAZs had on average their transit sheds shrink by about 8% during the pandemic, TAZ 369, next slide. Connectivity to jobs decreased by over 20%, with significant cutbacks in its range eastbound along the York Mills Road corridor. Decreases in connectivity to downtown Toronto could also be observed. We believe that an equitable service planning framework should aim to improve transit connectivity for socially spatially disadvantaged neighborhoods like this TAZ. TAZ 369 is notable because it's not recognized as one of the 31 census tracts that make up Toronto's neighborhood improvement areas. And that's because poor transit accessibility and connectivity, which this TAZ experiences, are not captured by many of the indicators that were used to designate those NIAs, which are based more on socioeconomic vulnerability and public health.
Yeah, our research finding informed several suggestions for public transit agencies. First, we believe that transit agencies that are committed to adopting an equitable framework for service planning should have an articulate and explicit definition for equity. Second, measures of equity should include socio-spatial indicators that are transit-related, such as connectivity and accessibilities.
Our interview with the transit service planner at York Regional Transit focused on how public transit agencies that do not have an equity framework in their service planning documents ensure that areas of socio-spatial vulnerability can have their mobility needs adequately met. Our interviewee mentioned the importance of using direct stakeholder consultation to inform service change decisions. They also mentioned that during the COVID-19 pandemic, stakeholder consultations with vaccine clinics, food banks, social service agencies, as well as large employers were made to ensure that transit needs for different users and for different purposes were adequately met.
Our study recognizes that this method of stakeholder consultation can directly help transit agencies gain real-time insights into the specific needs of vulnerable communities. However, while this method can help solve spontaneous and urgent issues, the effects of equitable service planning using socio-spatial data are irreplaceable. We have to be able to identify the neighborhoods that are vulnerable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to pass it on to our judge. I believe it's Antonio who will be asking you guys a question.
Thanks for that presentation. It was a really interesting study on accessibility and connectivity. One question that came to mind, though, particularly since a lot of the neighborhood improvement areas are in North Etobicoke, and your focus TAZ there, I think it was TAZ 369, is in North Etobicoke. How do you think your results would change if you included the job opportunities in York and Peel region? Because it's right next to the second largest employment area in the region around Pearson Airport, as well as significant jobs in South Vaughan. So how would your analysis change if you included those?
I think I'll jump in first. I think the results definitely will be a lot different, especially like you said, the Toronto Pearson Airport is located near it, and especially with another major employment center in Square One that's also within connectable reach, especially with the MyWay rapid transit network as well. For the scope of our study, we focused specifically within the boundaries of the city of Toronto.
Yeah, so just to build on that, when we looked at transit sheds, there is pretty good connectivity to, of course, Pearson Airport. Originally, our study did not intend to look at TAS 369. It effectively came up as something that was of great interest to all of us as we went through it due to its poor connectivity to many other areas within the city of Toronto itself.
Yeah. And to add on that, I believe the Pearson Airport, the main industry within that will be more of retail, manufacturer. So in this case, the likelihood of people taking transit are much higher. So therefore, it's definitely gonna boost our connectivity.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you for your presentation. I just see a hand that's in our chat from this phone number 519. Did you have a question that you want to ask our team? Okay, that might be an accidental hand then. I do see a question in the audience as well from William about the captive TAZ. So if our presenters, if you want to kindly just reply in the chat, that would be great. I will take the screen back. All right, so I want to move on to our next presentation, and thanks again for our great presentation, great team who just did a great job explaining what you've done in the past 2 months. With our next team on the agenda, and I hope your team member who got stuck on the TTC subway has been back. So this team's topic is on analyzing surface transit innovation post-closure of Scarborough SRT, the Scarborough Rapid Transit. Our presenters are Anika, Rajpreet, and Neil. And there are also 3 mentors. We have Michelle from Access Planning, we have Shahan from TTC, and Mohammed from Macintosh Perry. With that, I'm going to pass it on to our presenters to walk us through their work.
Awesome. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Hi guys, my name is Anika, and today I'm doing a presentation with my teammates Neil and Rajpreet. Transit is such a hot topic in Scarborough and the city of Toronto. Every day in the news, you hear about transit advocacy groups fighting for better and more equitable transit. For this competition, our team will present our research on the analysis of surface transit innovations that can be implemented post-closure of the Scarborough SRT.
So for a quick rundown of what we're going to talk about, first we'll introduce our case study topic and then bring it of how it's relevant to the GTHA area, as well as go through the background and history of our topic, and then delve into the research method we chose, as well as our 3 alternatives. And then finally, we'll discuss which alternative we thought was the best, as well as a Q&A period.
So our case study topic. In December 2021, TTC announced the closure of the Scarborough SRT. The Scarborough SRT is a 5-station light rail transit that connects Scarborough residents with the southwestern portion of Toronto, and it carries about 35,000 residents every day before the pandemic hit us, and 75% of those trips pass through Kennedy Station and Scarborough Town Center. Scarborough residents will be impacted negatively because when this station, the SRT, closes with all these stations, they have to use shuttle buses for 5 to 7 years after the closure. So we're exploring alternatives that can be used to help Scarborough residents and what they're going to be going through and how they're going to have transit systems still in Scarborough. So many of you might be thinking, how does this relate to the Greater Toronto Hamilton area? Well, even though the issue of removing light rail transit is unique to Scarborough, it can still be applied to the Greater Toronto Hamilton area. Many communities in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area lack supportive transit systems, which will create inequities such as ridership, which will increase as the population continues to grow in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area. According to Metrolinx, the Greater Toronto Hamilton area population today is just over 6 million people. However, by 2031, the Greater Toronto Hamilton area population is estimated to grow to 8.6 million people. There are many urban centers located all across Greater Toronto Hamilton area. When the population grows, because these areas are known to be attractive places to reside in, as they do allow individuals to better healthcare and more opportunities, there will be more need for better transit. And there'll be higher traffic volumes because there'll be more transit vehicles on the road. As transit will be needed and more vehicles will be needed, as there will be this will lead to transit operational costs increasing, and some communities may not get these transit vehicles, leaving those communities vulnerable and without accessible transit in their communities. The 3 alternatives examined in this case study today can be applied to communities across the GTHA that are located in congested areas, lack accessibility to GO systems, and desire transit with reliable trip times. Each of these alternatives can be used by transit agencies today watching this competition on how they can implement it in their communities and for the foreseeable future as population increases and transit infrastructure becomes a primary need.
Hi, Anna, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Hi, folks. So I'm also, as really pertaining to our topic, I'm stranded in Scarborough because the bus didn't come. So I'm calling in from my phone. So just a quick background in history. So in 2007, Transit City was proposed, which was around 6 or 7 LRT lines across the city. And as of 2021, construction has started on the Scarborough subway line, but there was a lot of just general confusion around what was going to be built and political mishaps. One thing that we think is really important is that Scarborough ridership does suffer from high levels of transit poverty, and there's really kind of important equity issues to be considered. That Scarborough residents, there's a lot of low-income households, immigrant populations, as well as family households who do not have access to reliable and safe transit. So within our poll, we're really trying to center the experience of transit riders and marginalized riders from Scarborough, as the 3 of us are all students who use Scarborough Transit daily. And it is not a pleasant experience for us. So this is really important for us to think about how can we think of alternatives that center Scarborough Transit, because in the past they have not been centered, which is an equity issue. So to the next slide, it just shows a graphic that a lot of the neighborhood improvement areas are within Scarborough as well. And you can notice that there is the issues of overcrowding on the TTC routes. And then to the next slide for our research methods is that we applied a best practice review of surface transit innovation. So we each individually reviewed different practices and policies that we thought implemented for our alternative. And we did a background review of the relevant context that included reviewing the history of Scarborough Transit. And our mentors were really great. They provided us a lot of feedback throughout this process, including our initial idea all the way to our final presentation. So through this review of documents and support from our mentors, we really started to think about feasibility, user benefits, and how exactly alternatives can be implemented. So my alternative is bus rapid transit. So that's a bus-based transit system. So the idea is that it uses dedicated bus lanes, it has stations, and it has off-road fare collections and throughput operations. The really big key issue with BRT is that it's really reliable. It's meant to come quite often, and it has a large carrying capacity. So BRT can move from 22,000 to 10,000 passengers an hour, and it's really popular. It's popular across Canada, with like Vaughan has a BRT, Vancouver and Ottawa, but also globally, lots of cities in South America and Southeast Asia have BRT systems. So the goal is really combining capacity and reliable service. However, we do acknowledge that the transportation of the SRT into the BRT can be another long delayed construction project, along with high financial costs, and like to expose Scarborough residents to a construction project that would take another 10 to 15 years isn't necessarily the goal. Thank you.
Awesome. So I'm going to continue talking about our alternative number 2, which is dedicated bus lanes. This type of public transit, the type of public transit that is most commonly used in Scarborough are buses. And most bus routes in Scarborough run east and west, neglecting the north and the south. So therefore, many people living in the north and south take these east bus routes or these west bus routes and use the Scarborough SRT a lot. By having dedicated bus lanes, we are able to do a lot more. So the solution of dedicated bus lanes in Scarborough are serving local needs and helping people move around their neighborhoods every day, reducing trip times and increasing connectivity. With dedicated bus lanes across Scarborough communities, there are higher frequencies of buses available to Scarborough residents in a sufficient manner. The number of buses have increased over the years by a larger percentage. We looked at data which showed that we are getting more buses as the years go by. To accommodate the transit needs of growing population in Greater Toronto Hamilton area, it is essential to add more buses and dedicated bus lanes to ensure that there's no overcrowding, as also the buses will operate faster, providing access to more individuals when they are not stuck in traffic. It'll be more attractive to people to take a bus if they're not sitting in traffic for a very long period. And there are not bus locks between passengers collecting at bus stops, eventually leading to overcrowding, which will be a big issue that many people want to avoid post-pandemic, because overcrowding can be a lot and you don't want to be in a congested bus because of health precautions. Recently, in the TTC implemented a dedicated bus lane for popular bus corridors. They found 2 bus corridors. Those are really used in Scarborough and Jane Street. So the Eglinton East bus corridor is a Scarborough bus route, is 10.6 kilometers long, and the communities around this bus route, many of the people living in it, they work essential roles, and even with the pandemic, they were using this route a lot. They did not see a change or a reduction in passengers on this bus route. This bus route goes from Kennedy Station to University of Toronto Scarborough campus. Many community members found that it was very useful and they were using it. And then TTC actually looked at an article, and this article shared how the implementation of this dedicated bus lane improved bus transit reliability and increased capacity on bus routes and resulted in faster, more reliable commute times. And they found that the bus route reduced by 6 minutes. So you would be riding the bus 6 minutes less than you would be in the October 2019 baseline of how long this route would take. So therefore, adding dedicated bus lanes for various bus routes after the closure of the SRT in Scarborough will lead to a reduction of trip times and would encourage reliable transit and higher ridership.
So looking at the third alternative is looking at the GO Transit integration system, specifically using the GO Rail integration system. So we know that a lot of residents in the Scarborough area are of low income or of a socio-ethnic culture where they only have one car in their family. So by increasing the use of the pre-existing GO Rail system alongside the TTC will definitely increase ridership across both services, as well as reduce commute times. A GO Rail trip from roughly Rouge Hill to Union Station could take 30 minutes, while a trip with TTC only from the same area can take roughly double that time. Therefore, by integrating both services, we can inspect minimum infrastructure costs, as well as peak ridership numbers using both systems, as well as it being a key opportunity as a form of education for the Presto tab system that we already implemented within the TTC. In the next figure on the next slide, there is actually a figure that shows a lot of the industrial jobs located within Scarborough, with a lot of them being located in the Scarborough Center itself, away from the main GO Rail line that goes through the Scarborough area. Therefore, a lot of residents themselves cannot be able to use this. So by taking pre-existing buses and pre-existing routes and repurposing it so that during peak hours, these buses can be able to shuttle and act as a new route for these GO rails, it can greatly and vastly improve ridership numbers, as well as a need and a method for a lot of people that can use transit.
So the big question we have is which alternative is the best alternative to take in Scarborough? All these alternatives we suggested can be applied to different areas in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area. So the first alternative we did talk about just to review was the BRT. The second alternative is our dedicated bus lanes. And the third alternative was GO Transit. So we made a chart to talk about each of the alternatives, and Neil is going to tell us which alternative is the best alternative.
So by comparing the pros and the cons of all three alternatives, we as a team decided that the third alternative, the integration with the GO rail system, would be the best due to it being able to provide services right away, low costs, and require minimal environmental impacts, as well as a key opportunity for education for the Presto system.
Thank you for listening. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit about Scarborough and different ways we can implement transit alternatives to make transit more equitable in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area.
Great, thank you. Very interesting presentation. I'm going to pass it on to Helen to ask a question.
Thanks, Yunfei, and thanks to the team. Really interesting presentation. The topic was great. I think with the increase in rapid transit projects that we have in the GTA, we're going to be challenged with these types of interim solutions between existing and future rapid transit infrastructure that's in place. The question that I had for you is, in reading your paper, I wanted to get a better understanding of alternative 3, which was your preferred one. Just wondering if you could elaborate on exactly how you would attract those Scarborough residents to the two GO train corridors. When I take a look at it, the Scarborough RT route and the catchment area doesn't seem to be synonymous with the two GO train routes, and just wondering how you would actually get them over to the GO train lines, and also whether you envision that there'd be a need for improved service or more frequent service on the GO lines as well, because it's not an apples to apples trade-off between an RT and a subway versus a GO train.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the great question. So one of the main key elements of this project, that especially with Alternative 3, is that it can act as a great education service towards the residents, where you're getting the word out really effectively about how, even though you're expecting an SRT closure, we're having the ability to present a secondary option which can help reduce the transit load that the TTC can experience with a lot of major routes in Scarborough, for example, the 905, where you see a lot of bus crowding during a lot of these heavy rush hour periods. So by having that education moment of presenting pamphlets, going around the community, for example, using the University of Toronto Scarborough campus to hold a consultation event with the public and key stakeholders to get the word out, that's one of the main ways we hope to get Scarborough residents who are of low income especially, and as well as reintroducing actually a past program, which was the TTC double discount fare program, which was previously terminated by the provincial government. Key Metrolinx figures have come out and stated in the past where they actually really enjoyed having that program, and it acts as an incentive for a lot of these residents to use or continue to use cross services with the TTC and GO rail, vice versa. So by that alone, we expect numbers to increase for the GO rail, and for current GO rail users to also hop on to the TTC as well. And if Annika, if you have anything to add on.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. I think with the Go Rail Transit, there's a lot of like big areas in Scarborough, and getting from one area to the other can be challenging. And there's a lot of Go stations in Scarborough located as well. And by encouraging people to use Go Rail Transit, they will have more accessibility, more equity, and getting more accessibility with equitable transit routes. And with the Scarborough SRT closed, a lot of people might have trouble getting to the south downtown area of Toronto. So having the Go Rail Transit, you can implement the bus and the Go Rail Transit so people can get to downtown faster. And we actually looking at creating a special bus that could go downtown, but that would not be doable because on the way there would be roads that would not be able to fit more buses and would not be able to have that ridership. So therefore we were like, what would be the best way? And the best way would be having a bus and integrating it with the Go Transit system.
Thanks. So maybe building on that, just a sort of follow-up question, and not to put you on the spot, but did you think of maybe combining alternative 2 with 3 so that you actually had buses in dedicated lanes getting you to the Go train stations in order to get you there, so that you had sort of a comparable service level and from a trip time perspective as well?
Yeah, for sure. So when I was writing up alternative 3, it was going through my mind, what if there was a way we can combine the best of multiple scenarios, especially alternative 2 and 3. But the reason why I didn't bring it up was because of the fact where right now it's still kind of in a pilot project sense, where we really don't know of how much of the pros and the cons the BRT system, the partial BRT system in Scarborough is going to have its impacts on. And me, myself, as a commuter who goes to UTSC all the way from Vaughan, when I do commute and I use that partial BRT system, I've noticed how sometimes it's not always used as effectively as it could be. So from my perspective, I was just thinking to kind of wait on and see how good that partial BRT system can be localized for the residents of Scarborough. And then from there on, we were able to separate the 3.
Yeah, and just
oh, sorry, Anika, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, so I worked on the dedicated bus lanes and I looked at different factors, like even adding multiple garage buses, like having places to have these extra buses in like garages and stuff. And I looked at that and that would not be doable. So when I was talking to Neil, even about the bus go integration, I was like, I had the same question as you did. And the thing is, it is a pilot project, but the cost and the increase of buses might need to happen. And there's some bus routes that do not go towards the Go stations. The 905 does pass by the Guildwood Go station. We could look into different options, but we may need to create more bus routes. That might cost more buses, and we are not getting more buses till 2027.
Thanks for your answers. Great.
Thank you. That was a really great presentation and good answers to the questions. I will take the screen back. And here we go. So that is all 4 presentations. Great job to all of our students team. You have put a lot of time, a lot of hard work developing this topic that you're passionate about, and they all definitely turned out really, really well. So good job, all our students. And then thanks for our mentors who have been working with our students for the past 2 months. I know it's a commitment, but I hope through this process, you're able to learn a little bit from our students, and obviously our students, hopefully they learned from our mentors. And again, thanks for all 3 of our judges who read through the papers and asking some questions are quite challenging. So thank you for our judges. Then we'll get to our exciting part. I'm gonna ask our host for the platform, Mustafa, to move our judges to a breakout room. Our judges are gonna stay in the breakout room for around 10 minutes and discuss the results for the presentations, and they will come back for the announcement of the prizes. Mustafa, are you able to move our judges?
Yes, I see Anne-Marie is joining. Yeah, 8 judges going one by one. Antonia is there. Helen and Sandra. Yeah, all the judges are at the breakout.
There we go. Great, thank you. So the judges are going to be in their breakout room for around 10 minutes. During this time, we prepared a quick presentation just talking about our alumni network and a brief introduction of ourselves as well. So I have a few slides to share with our audience here today while our judges are deciding in the breakout room. So if you're not familiar with us, we're the University of Toronto Transportation Alumni Network, short as UTAN. We're an association of U of T graduates of any discipline. So you could be coming from engineering, planning, economics, or any other discipline who are working as transportation professionals. U of T is Canada's largest university. We have around $1.2 billion of annual research funding. We have more than 85,000 students. It is the top Canadian university and has been ranked consistently as a top 10 publicly funded universities in the world. Here's a slide with our U10 committee. So you can see our chair, Anne-Marie, myself, vice chair, Secretary Kevin, who is timing our students here. We also have Victoria, Karina, Yasser, Joanna, and Yash as part of our committee. If you want to stay in touch with us after this meeting and want to keep updated for any future updates or potential in-person events that might happen this year or next year, please stay in touch with us. You can find us on LinkedIn, and you can find us on Facebook. We have a mailing list, so if you would like to join our mailing list, if you're not on there yet, please let us know. And if you want to get involved a little bit more, you can always join our committee. So be part of our team to help plan for these very fun, very exciting events that's happening. And we would like to thank our sponsors. We talked about the prizes that will be handed out to our students, and that cannot happen with the general sponsorship from we have our tier 1 sponsors here. So Dr. Mazen Hasuna, IBI Group, HDR, and Parsons. So thank you again for all our general sponsors, and we cannot make these events happen without your support. And if you're in our audience, and if you are one of the companies or individuals who would like to sponsor any of our future events and be featured in events or any newsletters, any marketing materials that's going out on Facebook or LinkedIn, feel free to contact us. You can contact me. My email address is on the screen, and we would love to be in touch with you. So with that, we're going to take a short 5-minute break and wait for our judges to finish their scoring and come back to the meeting room. And so please return in 5 minutes. And before we take this break, I'm going to hand it up to Judy, the director of U-Tree, to speak a few words.
Thank you very much, Yunfei, and thank you everybody for joining us. I wanted to start by saying wow to our students. A really wonderful thing about working at U of T is you get to have a sneak preview into the talent that's coming down the line and to be inspired by it. So I want to thank you for ending my day with a dose of inspiration. I think there might have been some other people on the line who are pretty interested in seeing what kind of talent is coming down the pipeline as well. Thanks to the sponsors, mentors, and judges for making this opportunity for our students possible. And everybody, thank you for joining us. It was a great event last year, and it was a great event this year. But in particular, I want to thank the hardworking volunteers of our Alumni Network Executive Committee. They're the people who have brought this event to you. They're the people who have brought events to us for the last 3 or 4 years since their founding. They have a dual purpose in building our network. University of Toronto has produced transportation professionals over the last several decades, and we believe they're a force that can be harnessed for good. And the University of Toronto Alumni Network is intended to build up that network. And back in the day when they were able to, they arranged some great social events, which we all look forward to rejoining. The other part of the thing they're doing is giving back. And while we can't meet together and reconnect in person and socially, they've been focused on the giving back to the students. And that's an event like this student competition, which has gone swimmingly so far, and very much looking forward. I'm glad I'm not a judge. I'm glad I'm watching it and just enjoying it. As Yunfei said at the end, if you're interested in joining the committee, I hope you will. We think it's a great addition to the transportation ecosystem in our region. And thanks also to the Friends of Utri who support it there. So on behalf of everybody, thanks. I'd like to thank the committee for its great work. It doesn't get much of a chance to be acknowledged in our COVID times, but they've kept everything going through this hard time, and we are just so appreciative of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judy, and I would like to thank you and Pat as well, who have been very supportive, and you're joining all the meetings with us, all the planning process. So thank you for that and all your kind words. So with that, I think we have about 3 minutes or actually 2 minutes remaining before our judges return to the meeting room. So let's please return in 2 minutes, and we're gonna see the exciting results. All right, so it is 7:05. Mustafa, do you want to bring our judges and Emery back to the meeting room?
Let me just send them a message to see if they're finished.
Make sure they have decided before they're back. Thank you. I think our judges are still busy finalizing things. I'm gonna see if I can join the breakout room and see where they're at. Hopefully I'll be back soon. All right, thanks everyone for your patience. We have our results. So I'm gonna hand it to our judges to announce them.
Hi again, everyone. So I will get us started here. I first want to acknowledge the submission number 3. This was Innovations in Surface Transit in Scarborough. This one is a very ambitious, very complex issue. As many of you know, transit in Scarborough is a pretty vexing issue, and it has been for a long time. And now the removal of SRP is making that challenge even greater. So kudos to the team of Annika, Rajpreet, and Neil for trying to take this on. We did really appreciate the breadth of the options that you looked at, from integration with GO Rail to BRT and dedicated lanes. One of the challenges that we found, though, was, and perhaps it was that you didn't have an opportunity to get some more direct input from some stakeholders involved in this issue. That could have really rounded out the insights in the paper, and as well as the presentation, given some more perspectives on the issue. So that was one of the issues that we found with this particular submission.
Thanks, Antonio. So it's Helen. So first of all, I just want to recognize all of the teams for all of the work and effort that you put into preparing these papers, and in a fairly short time frame within that 2-month window. So kudos to all of you for your dedication and your work on that. I think all 3, speaking on behalf of all 3 of the judges, I think you did an absolutely fantastic job, and made our decision and our evaluation process quite challenging. I do have the honor of announcing our 3rd place team, which is the Active Roots team of Angel, Danelle, and Ka. So congratulations. The paper was very appropriate for the challenges I think we're all dealing with, and speaking as a municipal employee within all municipalities, in trying to make active transportation an attractive and comfortable alternative. So the work that you did in looking at underutilized spaces, looking for opportunities to convert them to make them, one of our mottos is always safe, convenient, comfortable, and connected. And I think that's really something that you were focused on in trying to put that forward. So it was well thought out, and also looked at that community engagement, which is a critical element to making sure that an initiative is successful by bringing the community, getting their buy-in, and getting their support from that perspective. I think if there was one area that could have focused a little bit more in terms of improving the solution is looking at the implementation. And I think that's always one of our biggest challenges collectively, because unfortunately sometimes the devils are in the details, and trying to articulate what some of those challenges would be to implementation, and then determining possible solutions to those challenges would have been helpful as well to elaborate on in the paper. But great job, and thanks very much for the time and effort that you put in putting all of that together. Sandra, I'm going to pass it over to you now.
Great. So thank you so much. I have the honor of presenting number 2 place, or the second place, which is the Assessing Equity of Toronto Traffic Analysis Zones. I think the actually title is a little bit longer. Using connectivity measures. And I really appreciated, I think one of the points that you were trying to make was the fact that using socioeconomic factors only may not quite capture the spatial distribution of transit, and that's something that transit agencies, in collaborating with other public service agencies, should keep in mind, that using other, I think, metrics for equity and where more services are needed, it's important to also go back to transit and see where there are gaps in transit. I think one of the challenges we found was, I think just something that could have helped is developing your case more, and focusing more on bringing the reader along in explaining your point. You did a really good job in terms of analysis, but I think in articulating the fact that like what you wanted the outcome to do, or what the shortcomings of the current equity strategy, or the equity approach, was something that I think definitely could have been a little bit more explained. But overall, I think it was a really valuable research that you did, and really well, your analysis really made that point. So thank you so much. Congratulations, Benjamin, Harry, and Gordon. And I also have the honor of presenting our number 1 first prize for tonight, which is Honoring of Transfers. So congratulations, Rick, Navyata, and Alex. I really, your research was done really well. I think you made a lot of insights. You brought us along, especially your presentation. I think you did a really good job in building your case, and then explaining how it was relevant. And then it's stressing the fact that this would be a really important point to advance equity in the region. I think one of the areas that I already mentioned that we think could have been improved on is doing a little bit more research on how, what are the challenges and what it's going to take. I know that it's funding, but how are some agencies collaborating in this way and establishing reciprocity is something like that I think could benefit your research if you decide to pursue this further. Is something that I would think would really strengthen this. So thank you so much, and congratulations, everyone. Thank you for putting so much effort into this. We had a really good time reading through your research.
Great, thank you, and congratulations to our winning team. And just overall, every team has done such a great job. I think we're all very impressed by your work and how you presented your work as well. So kudos to all our team. I'm going to pass it on to our winning team, Rick, Navyata, and Alex. Do you want to share any words, thoughts on this?
I would just like to say thank you to everyone. Firstly, this research has been a great experience for me, especially coming from a non-transit oriented background in econ. I really wanted to pursue this more. And this has given me a great opportunity to just increase my outlook and just see more options in terms of where I want to go in my career as well. So yeah, thank you so much for this. It was a lovely experience. And thank you to all the mentors and the judges as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to all the judges and UTAN and the mentors for taking time, I'm sure, out of all your busy schedules to give us a platform and an opportunity to research and present something that we are really passionate about. So just wanted to say thank you. And it was great to hear all the presentations as well. Everyone did a fantastic job. So just thank you for putting this competition on.
And I just want to echo Alex and Navyata's points about this was a great competition to hold, and it really allowed me, and I'm sure Alex and Navyata, we all come from 3 different backgrounds, and we had a chance to meet a lot of different transportation professionals, from consultants to advocacy groups to all of the peers here. So this is really a great opportunity, and we're really thankful for this.
Great, thank you, and congratulations again. And I hope to you and to our participants, our teams who joined this competition, I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you learned through your research, and I hope you learned through working with your mentors and receiving feedback from our judges. And hopefully we'll see you coming into the transportation industry, and maybe in a few years you can be one of our mentors or be one of our judges or be part of our committee. So thank you again and congratulations, and I hope to see more of you in the future. With that, I think we can wrap up our presentation. If I can manage through all my screens and find the last slide of the presentation. There we go. So again, thank you all. Thank you to our students, our judges, our mentors, and everyone who attended today's competitions, today's symposium. I know everyone is extremely busy, and most of us would prefer not to have another virtual meeting after a long day, after being on call for 8 hours a day. But we really appreciate everyone, and please stay in touch. Please join us through LinkedIn, Facebook, join our mailing list. And we are going to keep planning one of these events in the future, and hopefully we'll meet in person next time. Emery, do you want to share any words before we wrap up?
Yunfei, thanks so much for hosting and for everyone who helped in this competition. Again, a great success. And congratulations to the competitors and all the students.
Great, thank you. And the presentation, the competition is done. We still have, I think, 7 minutes in this Zoom event. For our participants here, you're going to spend a couple of minutes staying in this room and just chat casually with everyone virtually. You're welcome to stay. And again, thanks everyone for joining. We hope to see you soon.